Have you ever wondered why the whispers of a past slight can still sting with the force of a fresh wound? Even years, sometimes decades, later? It's a curious phenomenon, this enduring phantom pain, as if certain transgressions engrave themselves not just on memory, but upon the very fabric of our being, shaping our responses, our self-perception, and the silent narratives we carry. It's the insidious echo of disrespect, a subtle poison that seeps into the soul, often unnoticed, yet profoundly altering the landscape of our inner world. This enduring reverberation, this silent erosion of one's inherent worth, can linger like a persistent shadow, distorting mirrors and obscuring the authentic self. But what if these echoes, seemingly destructive, hold a hidden potential for profound transformation? Alara had always moved through life with a quiet grace, a woman whose beauty was less about striking features and more about the serene light that seemed to emanate from within. Yet, beneath this tranquil exterior lay a labyrinth of unspoken hurts, a complex tapestry woven from threads of subtle dismissals and unacknowledged efforts. Her earliest memory of this particular ache dated back to a sun-drenched afternoon in her childhood home. She was 7, meticulously arranging her grandmother's antique porcelain dolls, each one a miniature masterpiece. Her father, a man of booming laughter and often absent-minded affection, entered the room, preoccupied with a business call. Without looking up, he gestured vaguely at her careful arrangement. "Lovely, dear. Now, run along, I need to focus." The words themselves were innocuous, but the tone, the casual dismissal of her earnest endeavor, had landed like a tiny, yet precisely aimed dart. It was the first tremor in what would become a recurring seismic activity in her emotional landscape. As she grew, these tremors became more frequent, more pronounced. In her adolescence, it was the teacher who consistently overlooked her insightful contributions in class discussions, praising less articulate peers instead. It was the best friend who would often interrupt her mid-sentence, her own stories always taking precedence. These weren't grand, dramatic betrayals, but rather 1,000 tiny cuts, each one whispering a narrative of insignificance. She learned to shrink, to anticipate being unheard, to prepare herself for the subtle erasure of her presence. By the time she entered her 20s, Alara had developed an almost unconscious habit of deferring, of self-editing, of making herself smaller to avoid the anticipated sting of dismissal. She became a master of anticipation, an expert in reading the subtle cues of disinterest in others' eyes, confirming her own perceived lack of value. Her first serious relationship, with a charismatic but self-absorbed artist named Julian, amplified these ingrained patterns. Julian, with his flamboyant gestures and theatrical pronouncements, dominated every conversation, every social gathering. Alara, drawn to his vibrant energy, found herself playing the quiet observer, the supportive muse, her own opinions and desires often swallowed by his overwhelming presence. He would frequently belittle her practical suggestions, dismiss her emotional needs as overthinking, and subtly mock her quieter nature in front of their friends. "Oh, Alara just likes to ponder," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand, effectively silencing any attempt she made to express a deeper thought or feeling. Each instance, though seemingly minor, chipped away at her already fragile self-worth, solidifying the belief that her voice, her insights, her very being held little consequence in the grand scheme of things. She yearned for his validation, mistaking his intermittent, performative affection for genuine love. The more she craved his approval, the more she lost herself, becoming a ghostly echo of her vibrant younger self. The pain was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, suffocating erosion, leaving her with a constant ache of emptiness. One particularly poignant memory stood out. They were at an art gallery opening, an event that Julian had been excitedly preparing for. Alara, having spent hours helping him with the setup, wearing a dress she knew he liked, felt a rare flutter of hope that tonight, perhaps, she would be seen, acknowledged. But as soon as they arrived, Julian swept her aside, engrossed in conversations with other artists and critics, occasionally glancing back at her with a perfunctory nod. At one point, a gallerist approached Alara, mistaking her for a fellow artist. Alara, for a fleeting moment, felt a surge of confidence, beginning to explain her own fledgling interest in photography. But Julian, overhearing, interjected smoothly, "Oh, Alara's just my assistant for tonight. She's not really into anything serious." The words, delivered with a charming smile to the gallerist, felt like a public execution of her nascent spirit. She retreated, the vibrant dress suddenly feeling like a shroud, the gallery lights blurring through unshed tears. That night, she understood, with a chilling clarity, that her worth in his eyes was directly proportional to her utility to his narrative, her presence always secondary to his own grand design. The echoes of her father's casual dismissal, the teacher's oversight, her friend's interruptions, all converged into a deafening roar within her, confirming a deeply held, yet false, conviction. She was inherently not enough. Yet, within the profound stillness of that pain, something began to shift. It was not a sudden epiphany, but a slow, almost imperceptible turning inward. The external world, with its constant barrage of validation-seeking, began to recede, replaced by a quiet contemplation of her own inner landscape. She started journaling, not about Julian, but about the nameless ache, the familiar feeling of being overlooked. She began to see the pattern, the recurring motif of disrespect, not as a reflection of her inherent inadequacy, but as a mirror held up to her own subconscious beliefs. This was the first spark of true individuation, a nascent separation from the collective unconscious of her past wounds. She recognized the archetype she had embodied, the Echo Maiden, a figure whose identity is primarily defined by the reflections, or often the lack of reflections, she receives from others. Her shadow, often projected by those who diminish her, was her own unexpressed power, her vibrant authenticity waiting to be unleashed. The journey for the Echo Maiden is one of reclaiming her voice from the cacophony of external perceptions. It demands a radical act of self-love, a conscious turning away from the need for external validation, and a profound commitment to the inner exploration that Carl Jung termed shadow work. You, too, may recognize whispers of the Echo Maiden within your own story. Perhaps you have found yourself shrinking, deferring, or silencing your true self in relationships where your worth felt contingent on the approval of another. The path to healing begins with acknowledging these echoes, not as a condemnation of your past, but as a profound invitation to reclaim your inherent sovereignty. It asks you to delve into the depths of your own being, to unearth the hidden parts of yourself that have been suppressed or denied in the pursuit of external acceptance. Understand that the pain you carry from moments of disrespect is not a flaw. It is a signal, a profound whisper from your soul urging you to recognize your own intrinsic value, independent of how others perceive or treat you. Begin by giving yourself the validation you so desperately sought from others. Listen to your own inner voice, honor your own desires, and cultivate a fierce protectiveness of your own spirit. Your worth is not a currency to be earned. It is an undeniable truth that resides within you, waiting to be rediscovered and celebrated. What would you think if I told you that the deepest wounds of disrespect often arise not from outright malice, but from the unconscious projections of those closest to us, their own unexamined shadows casting long, distorting figures onto our spirit? It's a subtle yet pervasive form of invalidation, one that chips away at the foundations of self-trust, leaving behind a persistent tremor of self-doubt. This second echo is less about explicit dismissal and more about the insidious denial of one's lived experience, a gaslighting of the soul that leaves one questioning their own sanity and perception. Serafina had always possessed an extraordinary sensitivity, a finely tuned intuition that allowed her to perceive the unspoken currents beneath conversations, the subtle shifts in emotional atmosphere. As a child, this was often dismissed as being too sensitive, a phrase that, over time, became a personal mantra of inadequacy. Her mother, a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper opinions, often struggled with Serafina's emotional depth, preferring logic and practicality over what she perceived as overly dramatic displays of feeling. If Serafina expressed hurt over a careless remark, her mother would often retort, "Don't be silly, it's nothing to cry about," or "You're overreacting, it's just how he is." These responses, delivered with an air of absolute certainty, taught Serafina to distrust her own emotional compass, to believe that her feelings were inherently flawed or exaggerated. This pattern intensified in her marriage to David, a man whose charm was as captivating as his emotional evasiveness was frustrating. David was a master of the subtle deflection, the artful redirection. If Serafina brought up a concern, even gently, about his late nights or his tendency to make unilateral decisions, he would skillfully pivot the conversation, making her feel as though she were being unreasonable, demanding, or even delusional. "You're imagining things, love," he'd say with a disarming smile. Or, "Why are you always looking for problems? Can't you just relax?" The most potent weapon in his arsenal was his consistent denial of her reality. If she recalled an argument differently, he would firmly correct her, rewriting the narrative with such conviction that she would begin to doubt her own memory. If she pointed out a pattern of behavior, he would insist it was a one-off, a figment of her overactive imagination. These interactions created a pervasive fog of confusion for Serafina. She started meticulously documenting conversations in her journal, replaying interactions in her mind, desperate to reconcile her internal experience with the external reality David presented. The emotional atmosphere in their home was one of constant, low-level anxiety for her, a feeling of walking on shifting sand. She felt perpetually unseen, unheard, and misunderstood, as if her deepest self were constantly being negated. Her once vibrant intuition, which had been her superpower, became her tormentor, whispering truths that David's unwavering denial instantly drowned out. She became hesitant to express herself, fearing the inevitable dismissal, the slow, chilling erosion of her own perception. She found herself apologizing for things she hadn't done, justifying feelings she had every right to possess, and constantly seeking external validation from friends, who, sensing the dynamic, often offered only vague reassurance. One evening, a particularly jarring incident occurred. Serafina had carefully planned a surprise birthday dinner for David, inviting his closest friends and family. She had spent weeks on the details, from the personalized cake to his favorite vintage wine. When he arrived home, visibly agitated, she greeted him with a joyful surprise. His reaction, however, was not one of delight but of barely concealed irritation. "What is all this? I had plans. Why would you do something without asking me?" he snapped, his voice sharp. Serafina, her heart sinking, tried to explain her intentions, her desire to celebrate him. But David cut her off, turning to their guests with a forced smile. "She means well, but she just gets carried away sometimes, doesn't she?" The room went quiet, a collective awkwardness settling over the celebratory atmosphere. Later, when Serafina, tears welling, confronted him about his hurtful reaction, he looked at her with feigned bewilderment. "Hurtful? I was just trying to lighten the mood. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Serafina. I think you need to calm down." His voice was gentle, almost pitying, and in that moment, she felt her sanity unraveling, her reality dissolving into his. The pain was not just of being unappreciated, but of being actively invalidated. Her joy and effort twisted into an accusation, her genuine emotion dismissed as an overreaction. This perpetual negation, however, ultimately became the catalyst for a profound awakening. The dissonance between her inner truth and David's external narrative grew too vast to ignore. She began to see his dismissals not as reflections of her own flaws, but as projections of his own inability to confront certain emotional realities within himself. This was the arduous work of confronting the shadow, recognizing that what was being denied in her was often being denied in him, and that his dismissiveness was a defense mechanism, a mirroring of his own unexamined fears and insecurities. This realization marked the true beginning of her journey towards individuation, a painful but necessary separation from the entangled narrative of their shared reality, allowing her to forge her own. She began to understand that the archetype she had inhabited was that of the gaslit sage, a woman whose innate wisdom and perception are systematically undermined, leaving her questioning her own sacred knowing. Her shadow was the quiet, intuitive power she had suppressed, the raw truth she had denied in herself for the sake of a perceived, fragile peace. The path for the gaslit sage is one of radical self-trust, a defiant re-anchoring to one's own internal compass, even when the external world attempts to spin it wildly off course. It requires the courage to sit with discomfort, to listen to the whispers of one's intuition even when they contradict the loudest external voices. You, too, may have recognized the chilling echoes of the gaslit sage in your own experiences. Perhaps you've been told your feelings are too much, your concerns are imagined, or your memories are wrong. This insidious form of disrespect aims to sever you from your own truth, to make you doubt the very ground you stand on. To heal, you must embark on a fierce campaign of self-validation. Begin by journaling your experiences, meticulously recording your feelings and observations, creating an undeniable record of your own reality. Seek out trusted confidants who can reflect your truth back to you, affirming your perceptions. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, who, though a Stoic, understood the power of inner fortitude. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your strength lies in reclaiming your inner knowing, in refusing to allow another's projection to define your reality. Your feelings are valid. Your perceptions are real. Your truth is yours alone to own, and in its unwavering embrace lies the liberation from the echoes of invalidation. Do you know how many women, even today, carry the invisible scars of a past that told them their dreams were too big, their ambitions too loud, or their very essence somehow inconvenient to the comfort of others? This final, most insidious echo of disrespect is the subtle sabotage of potential, the quiet stifling of authentic expression, a slow draining of the vibrant life force that propels one towards their highest self. It is the experience of having your inner fire diminished, not by direct attack, but by the pervasive chill of unsupportive environments that demand you remain small. Anya had always possessed an irrepressible spirit, a creative spark that manifested in her vibrant paintings and her fearless pursuit of entrepreneurial ideas. Even as a child, she was sketching grand designs for fantastical inventions and narrating elaborate stories for her dolls. Her grandmother, a woman who had lived through an era that often demanded quiet compliance from women, admired Anya's spark but gently urged caution. "It's good to dream, my dear, but real life is about stability," she'd say, her words laden with a well-meaning but subtly limiting weight. This gentle dampening of her enthusiasm, though born of love, slowly taught Anya to internalize the idea that her expansive dreams were perhaps a little too much, a little too risky, a little too out of step with what was expected. This internal whisper of self-limitation became a roaring chorus when she married Leo. Leo, an intelligent and outwardly successful man, prided himself on his pragmatism and his carefully constructed, predictable life. He admired Anya's creativity in theory, but in practice, he viewed her ambitions as whimsical distractions from the serious business of their shared life. When Anya spoke of opening her own art studio, he would offer a litany of practical objections. The cost, the time, the uncertainty. "It's just not sensible, Anya," he'd say, his tone laced with a paternalistic concern that implied she lacked the capacity for sound judgment. He'd suggest she focus on more stable hobbies, or perhaps pursue art as a quiet pastime, never as a serious endeavor. Her enthusiasm, which once burned so brightly, would inevitably flicker and die under the cold water of his logical dismissals. He never overtly forbade her from pursuing her passions, but his subtle dissuasion, his constant framing of her dreams as impractical or risky, created an invisible cage around her potential. She started to self-censor, to keep her most audacious ideas to herself, afraid of the inevitable eye roll or the weary sigh that would follow. The creative energy that once flowed so freely began to stagnate, redirected into domestic tasks or passive consumption of entertainment. She felt a profound sense of incompleteness, a quiet despair that settled deep in her bones. This was the most insidious form of disrespect, the dismissal of her very essence, her authentic drive, leaving her feeling like a bird with clipped wings, perpetually yearning for flight but too afraid to try. Her vibrant inner landscape, once a riot of color and possibility, began to fade into muted grays. She felt her unique light dimming, not because of a direct assault, but due to a slow, suffocating lack of oxygen. A pivotal moment arrived during a visit to an old friend, Maya, a woman who had, against all odds, built a thriving business out of her unconventional passion. As Anya spoke of her stalled art ambitions, rehearsing Leo's practical objections, Maya listened patiently. Then, with a gentle but firm gaze, Maya simply said, "Anya, what if his fears are not your reality?" The simplicity of the question struck Anya like a bolt of lightning. It cracked open a window to a truth she had buried deep. Leo's fears about risk and instability were his own shadow projections, his unexamined anxieties about venturing beyond his comfort zone. He was not intentionally malicious, but his own unintegrated self was subtly attempting to keep her tethered to his perceived safety. This realization ignited a slow but powerful transformation within Anya. She recognized the archetype she had become, the silenced alchemist, a woman whose innate ability to transmute ideas into reality was being suppressed by external forces that feared her true power. Her shadow was not a negative trait, but her own magnificent, unexpressed potential, her fierce creativity waiting to be unleashed. The journey of the silenced alchemist is one of profound self-reclamation, an unwavering commitment to cultivating and protecting one's sacred inner fire, independent of external validation or comfortable environments. It necessitates a brave journey towards individuation, a deliberate breaking away from the expectations and limitations imposed by others to fully embrace one's unique path. You, too, might feel the sting of having your dreams dismissed, your potential subtly undermined, or your authentic self-expression gently stifled. This echo of disrespect is perhaps the most painful, for it attacks the very core of who you are meant to be. The wisdom of the Stoics, particularly Seneca, offers profound guidance here. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. This applies not just to material wealth, but to the wealth of your spirit. Do not crave validation or permission from those who seek to diminish your light. The healing begins with a fierce commitment to your own inner world, to cultivating a sacred space where your dreams are nurtured, not judged. Begin by identifying those areas where your potential has been stifled, either by others' subtle criticisms or your own internalized fears. Reconnect with the passions that once set your soul ablaze. Start small, perhaps by dedicating specific time each day to your creative pursuits, regardless of external outcomes. This is not about seeking external approval, but about tending to your own vibrant spirit. Understand that the echoes of disrespect you carry are not permanent inscriptions of your worth, but rather transient imprints that can be overwritten by the resounding anthem of your authentic self. The pain you've experienced is a profound teacher, guiding you back to your intrinsic power. Embrace it as an invitation to a radical self-rebirth. The culmination of this journey is not about confronting those who diminished you, but about an exquisite inner liberation. It is the profound realization that your worth was never truly diminished, only obscured by the fog of external perceptions. The echoes of disrespect, once tormentors, become the very catalysts for your awakening, each painful reverberation pushing you closer to the authentic core of your being. This journey is a testament to the power of stillness, a quiet rebellion against the clamor of external validation. It is in the profound silence of your own company that you rediscover the unwavering strength that has always resided within. As you shed the lingering need for external approval, a peaceful inner rebirth unfolds. You recognize that true strength lies not in the absence of pain, but in the unwavering commitment to healing, to growth, to the relentless pursuit of your own truth. You become the alchemist of your own experience, transforming the lead of past hurts into the gold of wisdom and resilience. This is the ultimate act of empowerment, a conscious return to your inherent sovereignty. Embrace the quiet power of simply being, unburdened by the narratives of others. Walk in nature, feel the earth beneath your feet. Let the gentle rhythm of your breath guide you back to your center. Meditate, allowing the swirling thoughts to settle, creating space for clarity and inner peace. Practice yoga, moving with intention, reconnecting your mind and body. Jog, letting the rhythm of your strides propel you forward, leaving behind the weight of old stories. These positive actions are not just habits. They are sacred rituals that affirm your commitment to your well-being, replacing negative thought patterns with a robust sense of self-belief. Your inner strength transforms your reality. Positive changes ripple outwards, affecting every aspect of your life. You cease to seek validation, becoming the source of your own, radiating an authentic confidence that draws true connection. You realize that the most profound disrespect was the one you inflicted upon yourself by believing those damaging echoes. Now you choose to listen to the powerful, unwavering voice of your own worth, a voice that has been waiting patiently to be heard. You are not defined by what others failed to see in you, but by the magnificent truth you choose to recognize within yourself. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others to spread positive values in life. Thank you for listening. The end.